Barbara turned another page, revealing a stylized image of Themyscira. Golden towers stacked like a temple to memory, winged horses circling its peak. She studied it for a moment before asking Dianna how she imagined it. Diana's gaze lingered on the page. She said the island was ever-changing. The answer caught Barbara's curiosity. She asked what Dianna meant. Diana's voice softened. She explained that she had only learned the word Themyscira near the end of her time in the underworld, yet deep within her, she had always known it. It was as if she had been born remembering something she'd lost, a home she could feel but not name. Dianna spoke quietly, her gaze distant. The Wild Isle had been her home once, she said. Circe had been her home, yet even then she yearned for another place she did not know, a secret that lived only within her. She explained that Circe, though forbidden to utter the word Amazon, had been precise in her teaching, guiding Dianna toward its meaning through stories and symbols, never through speech. When Barbara wondered if Circe could have said Themyscira, Dianna shook her head. Perhaps, she said, but there were always ears listening. When even a goddess like Hecate feared who might hear, caution became survival. Circe believed Apollo's ban on the word Amazon was a snare. Hecate agreed. So they spoke in riddles, careful never to draw suspicion. Diana's tone softened. She recalled the endless hours spent reading beside Circe, the worlds they entered, the lives they imagined. That, she said, had felt like Themyscira Tower long before she ever knew its name. Then, catching herself, she paused. Her voice gentled as she asked Barbara if she had spoken too freely. Barbara assured her she hadn't overstepped. She only meant that Diana's way of thinking was unlike anyone else's, beautiful in its strangeness. She wondered aloud if that came from who Dianna was or how she'd been raised. Dianna smiled faintly. Could such a thing even be separated, she asked. Barbara only replied, unique as always. Dianna began to ask another question when a sudden voice cut through the room, a clipped broadcast reporting the destruction of an entire casino in Reno. The source was uncertain, natural, supernatural, or perhaps technological. The words fractured the calm like a blade through still water. In one motion, Dianna rose from her chair. She apologized to Barbara, promising to continue their conversation later, and in an instant was gone. Steve appeared in the doorway as she blurred past him. "Did you hear that?" he called, though her silence was answer enough. Watching her vanish, he muttered to himself that she clearly had. Barbara joined him, asking what was happening. Steve explained that Dianna had asked him to link the Hyron to breaking international news feeds so alerts would trigger automatically. Barbara exhaled, half admiring, half concerned. Clever, she said, assuming it doesn't drive her mad. Reno lay fractured beneath an eerie red sky. Dianna descended into the chaos, her instincts pulling taut. Something was wrong, something unnatural. She could feel it threading through the air, crackling at the edges of perception like static. Nearby, a reporter's voice broke through the noise, steady but shaken. Authorities had confirmed that while several were injured, the casino, set for demolition within the month, had been empty, keeping casualties low. Then a child's voice rose from the crowd, small but clear. "It's Wonder Woman!" Heads turned, hope and fear mingling in the smoke. Diana's gaze swept the ruin, and there, deep within the collapsed structure, something moved. A pulse of light, faint but alive. Her breath caught. By Hecate, she whispered to herself. What was that? Dianna flew through the shattered frame of the casino, the air alive with dust and heat. At first, she told herself it was nothing, maybe a live wire, something broken in the chaos of destruction. But then came that feeling again. It wasn't just charged energy. It was something desperate, something dark, an ache that pulsed like infection, crawling through the air like a virus, violent, hungry, alive. She pressed deeper into the ruin, guided by instinct more than sight. Then without warning, light erupted ahead of her. Not a flash, but a form, surging forward with the speed and fury of a storm. And in that instant, Dianna saw it clearly. The shape wasn't energy at all. It was a person made of lightning. Dianna drew her weapon, addressing it with quiet resolve, a trusted friend she had carried through countless battles. She thought they were going to need more than blades this time. As she struck, a thought crossed her mind. It was strange for her to reach for her weapon so quickly. Perhaps this inescapable feeling of darkness had already compromised her in some way. She steadied herself and lifted a hand in restraint, her voice calm. She hadn't meant to accelerate the situation, she only meant to know if the creature before her could understand her. But before the thought could settle, lightning tore through the space between them and struck her with full force. The blast consumed her, electricity wrapping around her like chains. A voice cut through the surge, a command to dissolve, and the world became nothing but sound. The thing made of light howled, though Dianna couldn't tell if it was pain or anger. The violence in the air matched the storm building inside her. Her thoughts blurred, overtaken by a rising fury that wasn't entirely her own. It became hard to think clearly. The anger in her mind felt alive, moving through her like a pulse. Was something dark inside her being forced awake, or was something darker being forced upon her? And how could she tell the difference? She fought to rise, gripping her weapon, but her blows barely slowed the creature. It didn't even acknowledge her attacks, treating her attacks as nothing more than an inconvenience. The creature's scream rose until it filled the air like thunder. With every sound it made, the darkness inside Dianna deepened, spreading through her thoughts and muscles alike. Everything in her told her to run, to escape the storm consuming the room. Yet another voice, colder and older, urged her to do the opposite, to kill. The walls gave way under the force of the blast, the structure collapsing in a cascade of stone and dust. Dianna hit the ground hard, buried beneath the wreckage, as the roar of destruction swallowed the last of the light.
Dianna pushed herself from the rubble, every movement heavy with resistance. Running or killing, neither were options. She couldn't lose herself. Above, the being of lightning broke through the ruins and fled into the night. It ran, the light of its form tearing through the dark like a wound. The aggression burning within her made it almost impossible not to follow. Her pulse thundered with something more than instinct, something darker. She reached for her helmet, the red visor reflecting her own fury back at her. And so, she gave in. She rose into the air and gave chase. As she soared after it, a thought pressed at the edges of her mind. Is that its plan? She wondered. Does it have plans at all? Back at the Huron, night pressed against the glass walls as Dianna and Steve reviewed the aftermath. When he asked what it was, Dianna admitted she wasn't sure. She had either lost it or it had simply dissipated somewhere over the Pacific. Steve explained that it seemed to have had a brief negative effect on the population, but once it left the area, everyone's behavior returned to normal. Dianna nodded. She had felt it too. Her voice softened when she asked if there had been any casualties. Steve shook his head. No fatalities, though many were injured, none dead or missing. Relief flickered across her expression. Praise to the goddess. As he packed his things, she asked if he was leaving. Steve confirmed he'd been called back to base, uncertain of the situation but promising to check in when he could. Before he went, she told him to be careful. May Hecate protect and keep him. He smiled faintly, his hand brushing hers. And you, Dianna. The Huron glowed with lamplight as Dianna returned. Etta sat among open books and half-finished notes, the news from Reno still playing in the background. She remarked that whatever had appeared there had been radiating something terrible, bad vibes made literal. It wasn't another tetradyte, was it? Dianna assured her it was not. She had never encountered nor read of a creature like it before. Etta sighed, muttering that this didn't make her feel any better. Gia entered with a stack of texts asking if she should pack everything up for the night. Dianna declined. Interruptions would always come, she said. Better to continue while they could. Later, as the night deepened, Gia poured tea for them both. Dianna thanked her before turning back to Barbara, who had found something of interest in her research. Barbara explained that the record described one of the earliest accounts of an Amazon battle. The remains of an ancient sea creature had been uncovered nearby. Dianna asked if any remains of Amazons had been found. Barbara shook her head. Only weapons, armor, and fragments, but no complete skeletons, not even a skull. Dianna sipped her tea, her eyes distant. What meaning did scholars take from that, she asked. Barbara replied that theories varied, from those who believed the Amazons never left their dead behind, to those who claimed they simply could not be killed. Etta leaned back, mulling over the story. Maybe they had been immortal, she said. Gia looked toward Dianna then, her tone cautious as she asked if Dianna herself was one of them, if she was immortal too. Dianna paused, her expression unreadable. She admitted she didn't know. Since she had no memory of her people or their full history, she couldn't say for certain. Before the room could settle, the Huron system broke through the quiet with a burst of foreign audio. The alert repeated in Spanish, an emergency broadcast. Dianna quickly commanded the system to translate and reduce the original feed. The translation came through in fragments. An foreign object reported over La Paloma, Uruguay. Sightings on the ground described a being made of pure energy. Dianna was already in motion, paper scattering as she sprinted toward the exit. Behind her, the voice continued. Witnesses spoke of light like lightning, but beneath it, a strange, pervasive feeling of darkness. Dianna landed at the edge of La Paloma shore, the night alive with fire and smoke. She couldn't see the creature, but its presence was unmistakable. Its darkness seeped into the air like poison. It was here. Ahead, the lighthouse burned. Firefighters fought desperately against the blaze, their silhouettes swallowed by the inferno. Dianna joined them, knowing that if she didn't act quickly, their efforts would be lost to the flames. She reached toward the sky, calling out a command, ancient words torn from memory, and the world seemed to hold its breath. A thunderous roar followed, a rush of wind and water colliding as the sea answered her. The flames vanished in an instant, leaving only steam and silence. The sea settled into silence, the steam rising like ghosts over the water. Dianna turned to the firefighters and asked where the creature had gone. One of them pointed toward a nearby village, already engulfed in flames. She nodded their thanks, gracias, and faced the inferno. The darkness was still here. She could feel it, pulsing faintly through the air like a heartbeat. This creature left a trail of ruin that went beyond destruction. It carried despair, grief, and rage. None of the gods or monsters she'd known behaved this way. Rising above the burning streets, she scanned the smoke and chaos below. To what end, she wondered? Did it seek something? Its path felt too erratic, too purposeless to be random. Then she saw it, a flicker of green light cutting through the fire. She moved toward it without hesitation. But as she drew closer, she felt the darkness pressing in again, creeping through her body like infection. The creature's power was affecting her even at this distance. She reached instinctively for her weapon, then stopped herself. No, she couldn't fight it that way. She had to resist. The air split with a blinding surge of lightning as the creature's energy lashed out. Dianna barely had time to brace before the blast struck, sending her crashing through the dirt and smoke. Pain flared through her body, but she refused to yield. She pushed herself upright, grit clinging to her armor. From the distance came the soft, frightened sound of a child. A little girl stood, clutching a toy, eyes wide, and when Dianna followed her gaze, the child pointed upward. The creature was escaping, streaking across the night sky like a storm given wings. Frustration ignited within her. With a cry of fury and defiance, Dianna drove her fist into the ground. The earth trembled under the blow, cracking and rippling outward as dust and debris erupted around her. The message was clear. She would not be made powerless again. At the Huron, Barbara watched another alert come through. Reports from the Dominican Republic spoke of a strange, lightning creature sighted along the coast. She exhaled quietly. Another incident, another city. Across the world, Dianna was already there. On the beaches of Verone, she struck against the being, the clash of their energies lighting the sky in violent flashes. Moments later, the battle carried to Merida, Mexico. Dianna raised her weapon as the creature reformed from light and static, its shape trembling but relentless. By the time it reached Waimea, Hawaii, she met it again, axe to lightning, force to fury. The collision split the night apart with a single cry that echoed across the ocean. Dianna collapsed back onto the floor of the Huron, her armor scorched and her breath heavy. The creature had vanished again, leaving only exhaustion and frustration in its wake. It was infuriating, impossibly strong, impossibly fast, communicating nothing, yet radiating darkness that sank into her the closer she came to it. It was bringing out the worst in her, and she hated that she could feel it. Barbara and Etta hurried to her side. Barbara looked to Etta and told her to explain. Ada noticed something while reviewing Dianna and Barbara's earlier discussion about ancient Amazon battle sites. Several of those same locations matched where Dianna had been fighting that night. La Paloma, Waimea, Merida, each tied by history to battles long lost to myth. And Reno, Dianna asked. Not that she could find, Ada responded. The casino there had been named Paradise Island, another name for Themyscira. That couldn't be coincidence. Diana's eyes lit with renewed focus. If they could predict where the creature would appear next, they might understand its purpose, or at least reach it before it struck again. She smiled faintly, a spark of determination breaking through her fatigue. "Thank you, Ada." Dianna asked Ada and Barbara to help her prepare a list of potential locations, the places where the creature might strike next. She mentioned that there was something else she had to do, though she didn't say what. They agreed without hesitation. Gia offered her help, but Dianna declined with quiet gratitude and left the room. Ada decided to make a crime board to track the pattern of attacks, and Diana's faint smile showed she expected nothing less. Outside, the forest surrounding the Huron was still, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. Dianna moved through the shadows until she reached a clearing where she knelt alone in silence. Inside, Barbara watched her through the window, wondering what she was doing. Gia, calm and measured, reflected that all magic demanded a price, and that the kind Dianna practiced likely came with a heavy one. Barbara asked what that might mean, but Gia only said it could mean many things. Barbara busied herself with the kettle, deciding to make more tea. Gia, reading the tension in the room, noted that Ada already had her crime board focus and suggested coffee instead. Ada laughed softly at the remark, admitting that Gia knew her far too well. Much later, the Huron was covered in maps and marked charts, a testament to women's tireless pursuit. They'd been busy, tracing the creature's path across continents. Ada, Barbara, and Gia stood with her, weary but proud. Ada remarked on the sheer number of battles Dianna had fought, and Barbara, ever irreverent, joked about winning a Pulitzer for documenting it all. Dianna only smiled, half in amusement, half in exhaustion. She could see how hard they had worked, how much of themselves they had given to this effort. Hecate would appreciate their sacrifice. The group reflected on the strange quiet that had followed the creature's last sighting. For a time, the breaking news had stopped, leaving them wondering if it had finally ended. But Ada had noticed a pattern. The attacks were moving to places more remote, places where no one lived to report them. It was a reasonable assumption if it wasn't proven. Barbara supported the theory with old records, battles in forgotten corners of Greenland, Ireland, Greece, Russia, Mongolia, China, and Australia, all tracing back to ancient Amazon conflicts. Dianna praised their work, knowing that it brought them closer to understanding. Just as she had finished speaking, an alert came through, the destruction of a sacred site in Delphi, Greece. Without hesitation, Dianna turned toward the open air, her eyes sharp and resolute. Night blanketed Delphi under a canopy of stars. Dianna descended toward the ruins, her armor glinting faintly against the ancient stone. Ever since she could remember, she had longed to see Greece, and now, standing above Delphi, it felt almost prophetic. But the omen was not a kind one. She could feel the presence before she saw it. That same dark energy, alive and malignant, spreading through the sacred air. Whatever blessings she had hoped this moment would be, quickly turned to dread. This was no gift from the gods, but a curse. Below, the amphitheater glowed with the pulse of an electric being, the creature of lightning and darkness she had pursued across continents. Stray bolts tore through the ruins as she landed. Dianna knew this place belonged to Apollo, and that any destruction here, even unintentional, would bring divine consequence. Yet there was no avoiding the confrontation. The creature moved first, energy flaring, and Dianna met its charge. Sparks erupted across the stones, thunder echoing through the valley. She demanded they end this quickly, but the thing answered only with another violent surge, hurling her back through the air. The impact hurled Dianna into the mountainside, the echo of the explosion fading into the night. She lay amid the rubble, her breath shallow, her body trembling with exhaustion. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if this was how it would end, defeated by a nameless force, her faith in her own worth proving her undoing. Fragments of Gaia's voice lingered in her thoughts. All magic has a price, and the kind of magic Dianna does carries a heavy one. She had dismissed it then, but now those words returned, pressing against her mind like a revelation long denied. A whisper coiled through her consciousness, dark, familiar, intimate. Fool! It is the darkness that whispers in your ear. Her heart stilled. The truth was undeniable, terrible in its simplicity. By Hecate, she thought, realization cutting deeper than any wound. It was not the creature, not a curse. It was her. The darkness, the destruction, the force she had been chasing across the world, it all led back to her own magic, to her own shadow. She rose slowly, the air around her alive with stormlight and guilt. I'm the cause. The realization struck her with greater force than any blow. The creature's form shimmered before her, pure lightning and fury given shape, its red eyes pulsing with unnatural life. Dianna's grip tightened around her sword as the truth settled deep into her bones. This abomination, the chaos, the destruction, it existed because of her. Every attack, every life endangered, every sacred place defiled, all of it was the cost of her own power. The magic she wielded, the blessings she had once thought divine, had demanded a price, and now the world was paying it in her stead. The creature loomed in the light, its energy crackling like a storm that had finally found its creator. And as Dianna stood against it, the weight of that knowledge bore down upon her with divine cruelty. This was no random calamity, this was her consequence.